What's going on, guys, and welcome to another Doctor Who video. Today I'm going to be ranking all 12 current incarnations of the Doctor. I'm not including the War Doctor in this because he didn't have much screen time and he also isn't a numbered Doctor. Also, this list won't be 100% accurate as I'm yet to watch all of Classic Who, however I wanted to do this before Series 11. Remember, this is my opinion, but I'd love to hear yours in the comments below. Anyway, let's get started. Number 12. The 6th Doctor, Colin Baker. This probably isn't a surprise as the 6th Doctor is at the bottom of most lists. Now, I will admit that I've seen less of this Doctor's era than any other, so that doesn't help his ranking. The 6th Doctor comes off rather rude in some instances, which I think is why people rank him so low. Like I said, I've barely seen the Doctor in action, but from what I have seen, he can get a little annoying at times. The way he dresses with the rainbow jacket doesn't help either, making him look like a circus clown. The Doctor should have a slightly out there costume, but this one went a little overboard. The fact that he tried to strangle his companion Perry at one point also doesn't help him, however I'm fairly sure that was to do with his regeneration going a bit wrong. All up, this is a Doctor I don't have much to say about because I haven't seen him enough, which is the main reason he gets last place. Number 11. The 1st Doctor, William Hartnell. This is the Doctor that started it all off. Now, I know some people won't agree with having the 1st Doctor this low down, but I just had to. I like every incarnation of the Doctor, so even the low ranking ones I love in their own way. The reason Hartnell comes so low is mostly because he was the template for other incarnations to come. Other Doctors have added on to what the first set in place, so because of that, he's naturally just not as developed. I think William Hartnell did a great job of kickstarting this role and the show as a whole, and I couldn't imagine anyone else doing it. The only other reason this Doctor comes this low is because occasionally Hartnell would stutter lines and they wouldn't have time to reshoot. This was honestly more of a production issue than anything else, but also the fact that William Hartnell wasn't at the highest health at the time. Apart from these things, the 1st Doctor was always and will be the original. Number 10. The 8th Doctor, Paul McGann. Now here we have the Doctor that's had the least amount of screen time of any Doctor other than the War Doctor. His only appearances have been in the 1996 TV movie and Night of the Doctor in 2013. Paul McGann was amazing in both instances, however. The movie was not very good, but the 8th Doctor was the key thing that made it watchable. He was such a different Doctor than what we'd seen before, and this would carry over a lot into the modern series. Previous incarnations had been mainly looked at as fatherly figures or just good friends, however the 8th Doctor adopted the romantic aspect. Now, this isn't something I'm a big fan of, but it was a nice change. In Night of the Doctor, he was at the end of his incarnation and was a much more brutal and damaged Doctor. This was completely different to how he was in the movie, but it still worked. The 8th Doctor was great, it's just a shame we didn't see him much. Number 9. The 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. Now here we have a Doctor that I keep changing my opinions on. He started off as a bit of a crazy lunatic, but ends on a much stricter and more serious note. Sylvester McCoy did a very good job at playing both these personas, however I feel like the silly Doctor was at times too silly. McCoy was a comedy actor, so they wanted to use that in the show. The Doctor had always had a funny side and some hilarious moments, but this one went a bit far. From the way he talked to the weird jigging about, this was a Doctor that at first you couldn't take seriously. In his final season, however, the character became much more serious and I definitely preferred this version. There were still silly parts in there, but they weren't overdone like before. It's just sad that this Doctor didn't get to his full potential until his final season, but I absolutely love him at that point. Number 8. The 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi. So we get to the first modern series Doctor on the list and it's the 12th. Now, I think that this Doctor had unbelievable potential but was let down by poor writing. Peter Capaldi is possibly the most legendary actor to ever play the role, and we expected greatness. Well, Capaldi himself definitely didn't disappoint. Whether he was playing funny or serious, he did an outstanding job and gave probably the best performance we'd ever seen. The problem was that Stephen Moffat didn't know what he wanted 12 to be. He started off as a serious and almost dark Doctor in Series 8, turned into an over-the-top rock star in Series 9, and then a blend of the two in Series 10. Much like McCoy, Capaldi's Doctor wasn't at his best until his final series, and that's disappointing. To be honest, I quite liked the dark version in Series 8, however what they did with him in Series 9 completely ruined him. I do however still love Capaldi because in his best moments he is amazing. Number 7. The 2nd Doctor, Patrick Troughton. Now here we have another Doctor that I just haven't seen enough of yet. I've only seen 3 stories from this Doctor's era and he's great in all of them. I just didn't feel like I could put him any higher until I'd seen more. The 2nd Doctor is completely different to the 1st and he's a more sprightly and energetic Doctor. Patrick Troughton was a great actor who brought something very different to the role, however was still similar enough to the previous incarnation that it's believable they're the same character. It's often said that his era of the show was one of the best, with many of the stories being near perfect. I can't wait to watch more myself as I've really enjoyed the ones I've seen so far. Patrick also did amazing considering the task he had of revitalizing the show. This was the first time regeneration was introduced, and people had to get used to this new man playing the same man they were used to. It's safe to say that if Troughton didn't do as good as he did, the show would have ended in the 1960s. Number 6. The 5th Doctor, Peter Davison. So now we get to a Doctor that was very different from his previous incarnations. Peter Davison was by far the youngest actor to play the role at the time, and people weren't sure how he would do. I think it's safe to say though that he did a great job. This Doctor was a little less crazy than his predecessors and had a much more human feel about him. I think this was good in some ways, however also made his character a little bland at times. It was however a nice change from the crazy 4th Doctor, and it was nice to have a younger Doctor who could run around a lot more. Like I said, there are times where the 5th Doctor is rather bland and uninteresting, however most of the time he's really good. His era was sadly wasn't amazing with only a couple of amazing stories, but there was still fun to be had. In a lot of ways this Doctor has a lot in common with the 10th, so that's probably why I quite like him. Number 5. The 3rd Doctor, John Pertwee. Next up we have a Doctor who I think deserves more love than he gets. Not many people seem to rank this Doctor too high, but I love him. He's a dashing hero, and the fact that he knows a form of martial arts is awesome. We get to see the Doctor fighting people, and it's something that this Doctor pulls off really well. He goes from being a posh, classy old man to an energetic fighter. This was one of the first Doctors I ever saw on screen as well, so that helps with his high ranking. I've seen a decent amount of his era too, and it's mostly very good. Season 10 is the only classic season I've seen in full, and it's a very strong one. This Doctor was also the first to be broadcast in colour, almost starting a new era of the show. He was also the first to meet his younger selves, which is a tradition that still happens in the new series to this day. All up, the 3rd Doctor is amazing and very unique. Number 4. The 11th Doctor, Matt Smith. We have our next new series Doctor now with the 11th Doctor. Now when this Doctor first appeared I wasn't a fan. I thought he was way too silly and just didn't feel like the Doctor. However, over time I came to really enjoy Matt Smith in this role, and the comedy, although at times too ridiculous, did fit this Doctor. 11 is definitely the clown of the modern series, just like the 2nd and 7th were for the classic series. I do like it when this Doctor goes dark though, because it's such a drastic change, but it's totally believable. One thing Smith did a great job of doing was making this young looking Doctor feel very old. There's just something about his performance that makes him seem like the oldest man in the universe in a mid-20s man's body. The main problem with this Doctor is that I'm not the biggest fan of his era. It started off great, but by the end it wasn't. Despite this, I've grown to love the 11th Doctor. Number 3. The 4th Doctor, Tom Baker. Now we have what a lot of people consider to be the best Doctor. I definitely think he's the best classic Doctor, however because I grew up watching more of the new series, he doesn't quite get top spot. This Doctor was absolutely crazy, but in a good way. He was silly, funny, but also dark at times. Tom Baker played the role superbly and has probably the best era in the classic series. He played the role for 7 years, making him the longest running actor to play the role even now. His outfit also became very iconic, and it's one of my favourite Doctor costumes even to this day. The long scarf, floppy hat and long coat all go so well together, but at the same time looks a little strange. That's really the best way to sum up this Doctor, to be honest. The one thing that lets this Doctor down for me is his final season. John Nathan Turner changed him to make him more serious and also made his costume more boring. Apart from this though, the 4th Doctor will always be legendary. Number 2. The 9th Doctor, Christopher Eccleston. Here we have the 1st Doctor of the new series and the first one I got to watch live on broadcast. This Doctor was damaged from the events of the Time War, and that made him very different to previous incarnations. He started off as a very stubborn and at times rude character because of what he'd been through. After travelling with Rose Tyler, however, he began to realise that the past was the past and there was still hope out there. This meant that 9 had possibly the best character arc of any Doctor because he ended up being one of the only Doctors to go out smiling and happy. It also helps that this Doctor had one of the best eras in the new series. He sadly only went for one series, but it was a really good one. In some ways, I'm glad Eccleston didn't stay on any longer because it could have ruined his run, but it would have been nice to see more of him. I think the only word to sum up this Doctor is fantastic. Number 1. The 10th Doctor, David Tennant. So yes, it probably wasn't much of a surprise that this would be my favourite Doctor. The 10th Doctor is the Doctor I grew up with and I absolutely love him. This incarnation is so fun, adventurous, funny, dark and serious all at the same time. Like Peter Davison, Tennant played the role with a bit more of a human touch, however he never came off as bland. There was never a dull moment with this Doctor, so he is always a delight to watch, even in the weakest episodes. Speaking of this Doctor's era, I personally think this is the best era of the show. Not only is this Doctor my favourite, but I think the writing was at its best here too, especially for the new series. Russell T Davies was an amazing head writer, and there was something about the way his series came together that I loved. The companions in his era were great too, with Donna Noble being my favourite of them all. There really isn't much else I can say about the Doctor, as I just love him so much. Well, there we have it. That was my ranking of all 12 current incarnations of the Doctor. This list will probably change once I've seen more Classic Who, but for now, this is how it is. If you enjoy it, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.